Stuttering or stammering is a relatively common speech disorder affecting many children between the ages of 2 and 5. So tell me, Mel, what causes a stutter?
That's a really tricky question because even the experts don't really know. Okay. So we know there are some things that are not causes and that sometimes can feel like an obvious choice, but that's kind of research has shown that that's not the case. So it's generally not related to anxiety or parent responses. When my little girl was in childcare at about 18 months old, someone was tickling her feet and one of the childcare workers was like, oh, don't tickle her feet, she'll get a stutter. It's not caused by tickling your feet.
Really? I've never heard that one before.
I think it's just an old wives' tale, but
that is hilarious.
But it goes to show for a long time I think no one's really known what
Wow.
causes it. And so as humans we like answers, and so we try and connect the dots and we look for connections that aren't necessarily always there. What we do know about what causes stutters, it's a neurological condition. It tends to run in families. So if you have a parent or family member who stuttered, and particularly if they continue to stutter into adulthood, you're more likely to have a stutter into adulthood. And it also tends to be more common in boys than girls. So when they're really young, it tends to be a little bit more balanced. But in terms of the ones who are more likely to sort of go on to stutter into adulthood, boys far outweigh girls. Again, we're not really sure why. So yeah, look, we don't really know. The good news is we do know how to treat it, even though we don't fully understand the neurology around what goes wrong.
So when should stuttering be investigated then by a speech pathologist?
Yeah, and so your intro was pretty right. It's pretty common between 2 and 5, particularly around that sort of 2 to 3 year old mark. Lots of kids go through a period of stuttering, and most of them will come through the other end without any need for intervention. The trouble becomes picking those kids who do need intervention and those who don't. So there's a few things we look at and we consider before we decide whether to intervene or not. And this is stuff that I often will just have a conversation with a parent over the phone about. So look, these are the things we think about, whether it's worth coming in now or do we sit and wait for a few more months, so we can decide when the best time to intervene is. So the things we think about is how worried the child is, if they're aware of it and it's making them anxious. So while stuttering isn't caused by anxiety, it's certainly worsened by it. So the stuttering is there, they know it's hard to talk, they get anxious, they find it even harder to talk. So if the child's aware, then that's one key point. If the parent's also anxious, that's another key point, because your anxiety around the speaking is going to be passed on to the kid. They're going to pick up on that anxiety and then they're going to get anxious as well. The other things we think about is how old the child is and how long they've been stuttering for. So what the research tells us is that if everything else is being equal and they're not stressed and there's not anxiety around the stuttering and it's not too severe in terms of every second word coming out, then most kids you can probably safely leave them for about a year. And after about a year, the chance of them resolving on their own gets significantly less. So that's kind of the things we throw around when we're working with parents around, is now the time to work on this or not. We know that there's a treatment that works best for preschoolers up until about 6 or 7. And so we want to make sure that we're kind of treating within that window as well. So if the phone call is a 5-year-old, even though they've only started stuttering for a few months, we might be more inclined to intervene than if it's a 2-year-old, because we've got that window of what's going to be effective in terms of the treatment.
Wow.
It's pretty complicated.
I never knew so much around stuttering. So what happens then if nothing is done about a stutter?
So if it's the early developmental stuff, nothing happens and they recover on their own and everyone's happy. If they don't recover on their own and that intervention isn't put in place, then there's a good chance that stutter continues on into adulthood. The trouble is, once we go past 7 or 8 or so, the treatments that we have available are less effective. So in the preschool years, the treatment is mainly about it's really play-based. It's really kind of fun conversation. The child doesn't really even know that they're being treated. The older they get, the more it's about trying to teach that child or adult how to adjust their speaking patterns to kind of eliminate the stutter. So it's a bit less natural. They kind of always have to work hard to get rid of it. They have to, as an adult, kind of put on a different sort of voice and those kind of things. So it's much better to sort of get that intervention in the earlier ages.
Under 7, isn't it? So between 6 and 7 is the ultimate age?
Well, up until then. So the LIDCOM program is the one that most speeches use up until then, and its research says around, past 6 or 7 starts to be less effective. So ideally in those preschool years, 4 or 5 is ideal. I guess the only other thing in terms of stuttering stuff that we get lots of questions around, I don't know what to do if my child's stuttering. So particularly if you're in that window where we're just going to watch and wait and see if it goes away on its own, the best thing you can do is nothing. Ignore it. So things like stop, slow down, take your time, all sound really reasonable. And again,
it brings more awareness.
Logically, it should work, but it brings that awareness around. It makes the child go, oh, something different about the way I'm talking. It increases that awareness, and that increases that anxiety.
Yeah, which then increases the whole thing even more.
Yep. So if parents can stay calm, ignore, focus just really hard on what the child's trying to tell you, which can be a little bit harder if it's all choppy and that kind of thing, but just focus on the message and respond to the message as if it had been said beautifully and smoothly, then that's probably the best strategies that I can give.
Okay.
Until that point where parents might decide that they want to go and get it treated.
Well, there you go. A speech pathologist such as Melanie can identify a stutter as well as treat it effectively. So if you have any concerns or questions regarding stuttering or speech development, then certainly give the team at Coastal Kids Speech Pathology a call today to see how they can help you.